Furrowing her brows, Shiro watched the queen disappear as Nantien landed next to her. She seems rather troublesome, doesn't she? Nantien said as Shiro agreed. If it was her actual body, I would have used error or more of my nanobots. Shiro sighed. Doesn't error affect their true body, though? If you used it, would have gotten her anyways, no? Nimue asked curiously as she returned all of the water back to the atmosphere around them. It does. However, Aisha's clone was, how do I put it, independent? Shiro frowned since her analysis skill told her that the Aisha she had faced was the real one, but at the same time, Shiro knew it was a fake since the soul wasn't there. Maybe that's just her skill. Her status as the queen of trickery might allow her to make clones that can take independent action, which makes them seem real. Not to mention, I was not able to track her back to her real body at all. Shiro sighed. Man, and from what I know, whenever a queen takes over a city, their powers are heavily cut down, and it'll take a while before they can get it back from donations of the people. Since the news of the city being taken over was rather recent, I can imagine that Aisha was rather weak. Do you think she revealed herself early because she knew she had been exposed? I can't imagine why a queen of trickery would want to expose herself so easily. Nimue frowned. Do you think it's because she wanted to get some information on Shiro? Since there was no danger to her real body, having a short exchange would actually be highly beneficial for her, Nantien suggested, as Shiro nodded her head. The possibility of that being the case is rather high. We'll need to be careful of her, since ingesting something she gives you made it so that she could take over the controls of your body. If this was her real body, there could be a chance that she can take over your body with ease, should you ingest something. If that is the case, even if I wanted to disembowel myself and heal to get rid of the parasite, I wouldn't be able to. Shiro frowned as she couldn't help but worry about their next exchange. Anyways, setting that aside, let's check up on the city first. With her skills, I doubt the people here are unaffected, Nantien said as Shiro agreed. During the fight, it seemed like the civilians paid them no attention, as if they couldn't see what was going on, but Shiro knew that there were quite a few casualties that were pulling in during their fight. Glancing up at the sky, Shiro could sense that the anchor had lost its luster and was nothing but a fancy crystal right now. Consuming it with her nanobots, Shiro started to check up on the people of Manila with Nantien. Even when they touched one on the shoulder, they ignored them, as Shiro frowned. Grabbing a young man, she closed her eyes and scanned his entire body. What the hell? Nimue muttered as Shiro's information was transmitted to the mana realm. They could see a parasite of sorts controlling their body as everything was now autonomous. Seeing this, Shiro understood why they didn't react. After all, they weren't programmed to react to this. If Aisha was around, she could probably take control of them and converse like normal, but now that she was gone, they were essentially human robots, unable to think for themselves. The worst part was that they weren't dead either. If Shiro wanted to save them, she'd need to get rid of the parasites in their body. But doing that with the entire city was going to take some time. Furrowing her brows, Shiro started to formulate a plan in her mind, using all of her skills. With her true spirit nature, she is able to control souls, so even if she destroyed their head, she could keep them alive, so long as she heals their body and places their soul back in. However, doing so was rather difficult, considering the population in this place and that her form only had a limit of 1 minute. If she wasn't done by the minute, the souls would most likely scatter and she would have just killed an entire city. But leaving them alone wasn't something that Shiro was too keen on either, since they were living like programmed robots. Mommy, what if you let me help? Addie called out as Shiro raised her eyebrow. What do you mean, darling? Shiro asked curiously. My fire can heal them. Maybe if you take the worm thing out, I can heal them. Addie suggested, as Shiro smiled softly and patted his head. Don't worry. Mommy can heal them too. It's just a problem of time. There's too many people, and managing them all in a single minute was going to be hard. Shiro sighed. However, just as she said this, an idea appeared in Shiro's mind as she face-palmed. How did I not think of this? She sighed. It's fine now. Mommy has an idea to help everyone here. Shiro smiled and let Addie down. Focusing her mind back on reality, Shiro cracked her neck before glancing at Nantien. I've got an idea on helping everyone here, so just give me a moment. She smiled. Take as much time as you need. I have the teleport shrine for Shanghai anyways, so traveling there won't take long. Nantien smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Flying into the sky, Shiro activated her divine raiment and chose nanobots as her base. Spreading out her hands, a Tier 6 magic circle started to form itself as it slowly expanded to encase the entire city. Closing. Her eyes, the temperature seemed to drop as gray snowflakes fell down onto the city. However, despite looking like snowflakes, they were in fact nanobots that were being controlled by Shiro, similar to how Requiem of the Dead targeted specifics. People. Shiro had her nanobots track down any sign of soul within the city and attach themselves onto them. Since they were all acting autonomous right now, attaching themselves was rather simple since they didn't respond. Once the nanobots attached onto them, Shiro clasped her hand together as the nanobots split apart into tiny needles and entered their body. With millions of body scans entering her mind, Shiro had the nanobots target the anomaly within the body, the parasite, and consume it before self-destructing in a non-harmful manner towards the current host. But just as the nanobots targeted the parasites, they started to fight back as Shiro furrowed her brows, since the parasites had no care about how much damage they were doing. Flicking her wrist, the entire magic circle that encompassed the city rotated anti-clockwise as the initial blue hue shifted to a dark red, erupting out with flames. The nanobots consumed the parasites as the flames healed up all of the damage that the host had sustained. Once that was done, they each fell unconscious, one after another, from the level of exhaustion on their body, as very few managed to stay awake. Glancing up at the giant magic circle encompassing their city, they couldn't help but find it to look so beautiful as a single girl was controlling everything in the center. During the time that they were being controlled, they still remembered everything and knew that it was this girl who had saved them. For those that were still conscious, they made sure to memorize her appearance before blacking out. While that was happening, Shiro was focused on treating everyone as her mana was draining fast. Even with her large reservoir, pulling off a spell that affected millions of people was still strenuous for her. Once she was done, the magic circle slowly disappeared as sweat rolled down her face. Flickering next to her, Nantien handed her a towel as she smiled. "Thanks," she said while wiping the sweat away. You've worked hard. I haven't detected any anomalies from the people, so it seems like it should be over," Nantien said while glancing down. I've gotten rid of the parasites. Let's not waste any time. We still have the problem in Shanghai." Shiro sighed as Nantien nodded his head. "Do you want me to carry you down? You seem rather exhausted," he joked as Shiro rolled her eyes and hit him with the towel. "Ask that question once I'm disabled or can't move. Knowing my luck, that might happen in the next fight." Shiro rolled her eyes as they made their way to the teleport shrine. Teleporting to Shanghai, they immediately put their guard up and scanned the city. Looking towards the Shanghai Pearl Tower, Shiro could see a crystal floating above the city as mystic energy pulsed out like the one in Manila. Understanding that, the queen was probably weakened like Aisha. It was a good chance to deal them a heavy blow, but this time she was going to keep her guard up even more than last time, as she had accidentally allowed Aisha to feed her one of the parasites. Thankfully, she wasn't at full strength, otherwise the outcome could have been bad. Before they could even talk about what they should do, they felt a surge of mana erupt out from the far end of the city as a giant explosion appeared in the distance, with a column of smoke acting as their beacon. Both Shiro and Nantien looked at one another before nodding their heads. Flying towards the smoke in the distance, they could sense 3 mana signals fighting right now, as one of them was quite familiar to Nantien, as it belonged to Li Jian, who owned the sect. As for the 2 others, he didn't recognize them, but they had the same feeling as the other queens, which meant that they were currently fighting, and his adoptive father was helping out one of them. As for Shiro, she only widened her eyes in shock, activating her lightning divine raiment. She didn't say anything and flew as fast as she could. Bang! Slamming his fist against the young woman's body, Li Jian had a flaming red aura around him, as illusionary golden armor protected his body, with a giant spear in his hand pierced towards her chest. Unfortunately for him, his opponent wasn't going to be hit easily as her body split apart into a swarm of fireflies. Furrowing his brows, he jumped back as a rhythmic sound of swords being unsheathed could be heard. Suddenly, a blanket of swords descended from the skies as all of the fireflies were eradicated. Landing next to Li Jian, an elven woman with golden hair and a battle dress could be seen with a cold expression. Runic swords floated around her as they would change forms with each passing season. Each sword that was displayed was different from the last, as it seemed like she had an infinite armor of sorts. "Have you figured out her powers yet?" Isilia asked as Li Jian shook his head. "Not yet. Her power as a queen covers quite a wide variety, and I haven't been able to see past her disguise just yet. If I knew her title as a queen, it'll be much easier." Li Jian replied with a frown as Isilia clicked her tongue. "Just keep trying then." Slamming her hands down in front of her, a tier 6 magic circle erupted out as a cage appeared around the enemy queen. Small silver portals appeared as swords shot towards the woman who was trapped in a wave, waving her. Several centipedes appeared and wrapped around her, blocking the strikes which left faint white scratch marks. Seeing this, most would think that she's probably the queen of insects or something similar, but Isilia knew better since she had demonstrated powers of other monsters, not just insects. If anything, it was stranger to see her use bestial powers, as they were almost on the level of the Beast Queen, Ranobes. The enemy queen wore a long-sleeved dress, some stockings and boots. Her sleeves were extremely long as it reached her knees. Her dress was colored with light green, pink, and blue. Each time she swiped with her sleeves, a different power seemed to be used, as it made her extremely hard to deal with. Tracing her finger across the surface of her blade, Isilia allowed her sword to draw some blood as the silver blade was dyed a blood red with a single drop. Flicking it to the side, her body disappeared and reappeared next to the queen. A web of sword lights appeared as she slashed towards the back of the queen. But her reaction was the same as ever, a single smirk before turning around and allowing the sword to slash her body. Breaking apart into what seemed to be slime pieces, she reassembled herself and kicked towards Isilia's stomach, parrying. Hit with her sword, Isilia watched as Li Jian stabbed towards the queen once more as she grabbed his spear and pulled him closer to her, which surprised him as anyone who had touched his spear before had their hands shredded apart. Feeling danger, he quickly jumped back and abandoned his spear as bones erupted out of her and broke the spear apart. Had he stayed, he would have sustained heavy injuries. Reaching into his inventory, Li Jian pulled out 2 great swords instead as he cleaved towards her. Bang! Forcing the queen to take a few steps back, he combined the 2 great swords together before stabbing it down. A tier 6 magic circle erupted out in the sky as a giant golden sword slammed down into the queen's body. Crash slamming against the pavement of the city, she flipped her body back to avoid Isilia's strikes, as there were chains connected to the pommel of her blade. Throwing it towards the queen, Isilia made a seal with her hands as runes light up and split the blades into different copies, with hundreds of swords now swarming around her with chains trailing the swords. The enemy queen knew that there was a good chance for her to be restricted. Creating a tier 6 magic circle in front of her, the enemy queen pushed her hand through the spell as a scaled dragon head could be seen in the place of her hand. Cracking its mouth open, a radiant fireball shot towards Isilia as she didn't falter. Stomping down, trees started to grow and envelop the fireball in an instant, restraining the blast from affecting the city. But while she was doing this, the dragon head had already consumed quite a few of her blades as the chains were snapped apart and an exit was formed. Dashing out, the enemy queen raised her hand as the dragon head was dismissed. In its place was a silver sword which seemed to pulse to the rhythm of a heartbeat. Slashing in the air in front of her, the dimension seemed to split apart as several pairs of eyes lit up. Ripping the portal apart, an undead dragon reared its head out of the split as a tier 7 magic circle appeared around its mouth. Not good. Isilia widened her eyes as she recognized this skill. It was a large-scale extinction-level spell which would eradicate a large area of space to nothingness should it activate. Summoning a black and red Odachi sword, a murderous aura erupted out of her as she cleaved upwards with the giant blade. Boom! If God had just erased a single line in the world, the undead dragon and the magic circle split into 2 halves as Isilia coughed up a mouthful of blood and stored the blade away. Using this chance, Li Jian activated one of his skills as his illusionary. Armor was upgraded. Previously, it could be described as normal armor, but now it was akin to heavenly armor, which caused one to feel fear with a single glance. Forming a fist with his right hand, Li Jian dashed towards the queen and punched towards her. The space seemed to collapse as the light around her distorted. Bang! Punching her through the body, Li Jian only gritted his teeth, since he realized that his skill did nothing. Quickly jumping back, he avoided her counterattack. Just as he stepped back, a portal opened up beside him and a jiggered blade threatened to cut his head off. Bending to the side, he kicked the blade away as a wave of sword light cut one of the skyscrapers into 2 halves. Turning his attention back to the enemy queen, he saw a second tier 7 magic circle being formed as he felt the touch of death coming ever so close. Suddenly, the sky darkened as clouds gathered in the sky. Pushing the clouds aside, tens of orbital cannons descended as each of them were filled with tens of tier 6 magic circles. Boom! Firing towards the enemy queen, each of the blasts were enhanced with celestial path, as the tier 7 magic circle was shattered apart with ease. Flickering next to Isilia, Shiro glanced down at her best friend who should have died a long time ago. Holding back her tears, Shiro turned away from her and looked at the queen, who still stood unfazed in the sky. "You better explain what happened later," Shiro said as Isilia smiled softly. "Of course." "Same old tactic?" She chuckled. "Same old tactic." Shiro nodded her head with a smile as mana erupted out of them. Clasping her hands together, Shiro thought of a blueprint that she had not used in years, as the last time she had used it was for her friends. The tears that she tried to hold back were threatening to leak out as nanobots converged towards her. Palms. Creating a crystal, Shiro grabbed it with her hand before shattering it. The spray of nanobots launched themselves towards Isilia as armor started to form around her body. Mechanized blade, Saint Mk Efaf, feeling the familiar armor around her. Body. Isilia smiled as she crouched down and two thrusters appeared behind her. Boom! Shattering the ground beneath her, her body reappeared next to the enemy queen as several swords materials next to her. Grabbing them, she twisted her body as red runes lit up on the blade. Poochie! Cutting into the queen's body, Isilia didn't say anything as the dials on the guard of the sword rotated clockwise. The blades that cut into the queen suddenly morphed into gun barrels as Isilia pulled the trigger. Bang! Firing a blast inside the queen, Isilia watched as her body was flung back. Flicking her wrist, the gun barrel disassembled into several daggers. Making a seal with her hand, the daggers flared up with a golden aura as Shiro appeared above her. With 2 rail cannons mounted on her shoulders, Shiro sent out several nanotech wires which wrapped around the enemy queen, locking her in place. Activating her guns, several Tier 6 magic circles appeared around the gun barrel as mana surged towards the barrel. Firing 2 shots, Isilia threw the blades towards the blast radius. In a trim, she commanded as a barrier was formed using the blades as anchor pieces. With the explosion concentrated into a small area, the queen was being cooked, while resisting against the initial impact. Landing in front of the barrier, Shiro summoned Sylvanas. As blood-red circuits appeared on the blade, activating her divine raiment, Shiro chose nanobots as the base, while black armor wrapped around her dress. Following up with her boundary, her eyes turned cold as she cleaved towards the faint shadow of the queen. Thanks to the effects of her sword when paired with error, all of her defenses were essentially nullified. Bang! Slamming her sword into her, Shiro could see a faint red flame within the queen's body that was made from what seemed to be coding. Recognizing it to be the source code, Shiro flickered in front of her and dragged her sword upwards. Feeling danger, the enemy queen immediately took a step back, but both Li Jian and Nan Tian were waiting behind her. Brandishing their weapons, they stopped her retreat as Li Jian's spear pinned her against the ground. But before Shiro's blade could hit her source code, her body split open as several dragon heads thrashed out and attacked them. Dodging the dragon heads, Shiro clicked her tongue when she saw the queen in the sky with a bloodied dress. Her nonchalant expression had already disappeared as she glared at the group with anger. Gritting her teeth, she raised her hand as several Tier 7 magic circles appeared in the air, and she disappeared with the crystal shattering, which meant that she had given up on this city. Before she left, they managed to catch a glimpse of her true title since she was rather injured. Arnea, Chimera Empress LVL, 650. Widening her eyes, Shiro didn't realize that they were actually against an empress, and not just a queen. Since she was an empress class being herself, she knew the difference between them. If she had been at full strength, they would have died without question. Thankfully, they fought her when she was at her weakest, but the danger wasn't over yet, as several Tier 7 magic circles hung above them, as they had the same power as her when she was in her demigod state. Taking a deep breath, Shiro slammed her hand against the ground as hundreds of rail cannons started to appear around the city, as they were each reinforced with celestial path. Activating them simultaneously, she launched a barrage against the Tier 7 magic circle in the sky. However, to her surprise, only the outside was chipped slightly as the main part of the magic circle stayed intact. Furrowing her brows, Shiro fired a second barrage, but nothing happened. This isn't good. We might have to evacuate the city instead. This isn't something we can destroy right now. Isilia frowned as Shiro agreed. Let me try one more time, though. It's powerful, but it doesn't have divine energy, which means that Arnea hasn't reached demigod status. Well, she hasn't started to become a demigod yet. Shiro narrowed her eyes as she wanted to give it one more try. Only this time, with her divine energy rather than mana. Closing her eyes, she focused her mind as golden runes lit up in her mana realm. Aiming her hand towards the Tier 7 magic circles in the sky, Shiro snapped her eyes open as she activated divine enchantment on her celestial path. Celestial path. Mana nullification. With her celestial path being upgraded for a short while, Shiro immediately used her divine energy to enhance the spell, rather than make a new original spell since making. Divine energy spells were much harder than normal spells. Enhancing her rail cannons, there were now golden runes materializing on the barrel, as a divine aura erupted out of each gun. Looking around in surprise, Isilia didn't realize how much Shiro had improved since the last time that they had met in the library when she was disguising herself as Arwen. Bang, bang, bang! Watching the barrage of golden energy which broke off a large chunk of the magic circle every time it hit, Isilia smiled softly as she leaned on a lamppost and glanced towards Nan Tian while Shiro was dealing with the magic circles, since there was nothing that they can do right now. So, what's your relationship with Nai? Or should I say Shiro? Isilia chuckled, since Ni was the nickname that she had given for Shiro when they were together in Arya. I'm pursuing her, Nantien replied truthfully, since it wasn't really anything. To hide. Oh my, you're rather... Should I call you masochistic with Shiro's habits? Isilia asked with a raised eyebrow and glanced towards Shiro. Just because I'm focusing on the spell doesn't mean I can't hear you, Shiro retorted, but she had a smile on her face, since it reminded her of the good times she had with Isilia back in Arya. I know, but I'm asking anyways. Speaking of which, I do hope that he didn't fall in love with you after you hit his arse. Otherwise, it would be rather awkward considering the fact that you hate masochists. Isilia laughed. If his ass was hit by me, do you really think he'd still be around? Shiro clicked her tongue, point taken. So it seems like she's rather lenient towards you considering the fact that she hasn't pierced you yet. Congratulations. Isilia patted Nantien's shoulder as he wasn't too sure about how to take the compliment. Right then, there's no danger of the spell activating now, and the cannons are taking care of the rest of the magic circles autonomously. Why don't we have that talk now? Shiro said. Isilia nodded her head. First of all, Li Jian, how the hell do you know her? From what the system had said, I could have just asked you and you would have led me to her. Shiro frowned as Li Jian glanced towards Isilia. How about we talk when we're in a private spot? It seems like there are quite a few people that are approaching our current location. Isilia smiled as Shiro nodded her head. She could recognize one of the mana signals to belong to the dark elf that she had sparred against previously and knew that it was the government trying to make sense of what had happened. As expected, not too long later, Shiro saw Grangel flickering at the scene with a surprised expression. Fancy seeing you here. Shiro smirked as Grangel blinked his eyes. It seems like you have resolved the problem. I thank you on behalf of the government. Grangel smiled as he did a polite bow. Oh my, Shiro's actually getting along with authoritative figures now. Good job. Isilia smiled as she hugged Shiro from behind and stroked her hair. Feeling her prestige go down the drain in an instant, Shiro's smile twitched. Anyways, we haven't dealt with the queen just yet since she escaped, but the anchor in this spot has already disappeared. All you need to do now is help the people that were dragged in and repair some of the damages, I suppose. I hope that the government will take the queens more seriously after this, Shiro said with a serious expression. Nodding his head, Grangel looked at the destruction caused. Don't worry, I'll make sure the old geezers at the top takes the threat seriously, Grangel replied as Shiro nodded her head. Opening a rift, she dragged in Nantien, Li Jian, and Isilia away from the scene so that they could talk in private. Teleporting out of Shanghai, Shiro landed softly against the ground as the three appeared behind her. Right then, what do you want to know first? Isilia asked with a smile while sitting down on a boulder by the side. How did Li Jian come to know you? Shiro asked while sitting next to her and leaned on her shoulder like old times. Well, you see, after I passed away for a second time, I woke up in my old body, which was heavily damaged. It was barely healed, and I was on the verge of death. I didn't know how many years had passed, but things looked different, and Li Jian was around the area at the time. He saved me and brought me back to the sect, where I was healed, and as repayment, I decided to help him out with some of his tasks and look after the library. I also continued my study on different worlds, dungeons, and things related to the system. During this, I managed to make a breakthrough and became the Elven Queen of Arya. Usually, this would be impossible, since I'm technically not a part of Arya anymore, but thanks to my research, I managed to achieve it. Isilia replied. How did you even wake up in your old body? Shiro raised her eyebrow, since even she had been born in a new body rather than retain her old one. Well, it was thanks to my research with different worlds. I don't know if you have come in contact with it yet or not, but I had succeeded in making a pseudo-dungeon of sorts of our own world using the system's rules. Naturally, I also succeeded in finding the moment where I died, but that time was isolated, so no matter what I did to it, what happened could not be changed. But since I found my time of death, I was able to use my old vessel, I suppose, for lack of a better word. Though this is just the surface understanding, Isilia replied as Shiro furrowed her brows. I see. My next question is, why did you force me to kill you back then? Shiro glanced up with teary eyes as Isilia felt. Her heart softened. It was the only way for us to survive that situation. Plus, with our understanding of Ikari, do you really think he'll come help us in time? Isilia sighed as Shiro shook her head. But it's fine, though. Aren't we both here now? Isilia chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. What about your husband? Though, didn't you go look for him? If you did, Lyrica might not have been bullied in the royal family, Shiro asked curiously. Well, I did try to look for him, but unfortunately, he had already passed on, and I wasn't able to recover him like what I did for myself. As for Lyrica, I decided to let her go since she would eventually meet you. Isilia smiled. How would you know? Shiro blinked in surprise. because prophets are rather accurate in this world. The best path would be to let mature on her own and run into you eventually where she would grow faster than anyone else. Cecilia sighed. She would have loved to go spend time with Lyrica, but doing so would have resulted in a different future. One that could be rather grim in nature. Plus, she had already died, so it made things easier in a way. You should definitely go see her. If she found out that her mother was alive, she'll be overjoyed. Shiro sighed. But don't you think? She'll blame me? Cecilia asked as Shiro shrugged. I don't know, but it's better to let her know about your survival, Shiro replied as Cecilia nodded her head. Does she know that you're my friend? Cecilia asked. I have. I'm kind of her aunt right now, Shiro laughed. Rather strange, isn't it? Considering your body is younger than her by quite a bit. Cecilia smiled. Speaking of which, your daughter seemed to be in love with me, Shiro said with a slightly forced smile as Cecilia raised her eyebrow. You're serious? Do I joke about these things? Shiro asked as Cecilia leaned back slightly. And that is rather strange, isn't it, since she's in love with a granny? Cecilia grinned. Oi, what the hell do you mean by granny? Shiro pinched Cecilia's cheeks as she only laughed. Well, for someone who's around 300 years old, I definitely wouldn't call you someone young. Cecilia hoped away as Shiro's face blushed. With embarrassment at the mention of her age. Wait, you're 300 years old? Nimue raised her eyebrow. Shut it. Shiro gritted her teeth as Atesh hugged Shiro's leg. Mommy is young. Don't listen to rude auntie. Atesh said as Nimue felt her heart crack. Pfft, rude auntie. Shiro glanced at Nimue with a smug grin. Picking up Atesh, she brought him out to the real world. Oh, right, this is my son, Shiro called out as Cecilia paused in her footsteps. Pfft! You have a son? Cecilia looked at Shiro in disbelief, since Shiro having romantic relationships seemed rather impossible to her. Adoptive son, I guess, but in one way I technically did give birth to him since he was born. For my flames, Shiro replied as she waved her hand and life fire burst out of her palm. Doing the same motion, Addy also summoned some life fire, but his flames were more of a golden red rather than green. Seeing that Addy copied Shiro's actions, Cecilia couldn't help but laugh and pat Addy's head. Call me beautiful auntie, Cecilia said as Addy nodded his head. Beautiful auntie, Addy called out in a rather small voice as Cecilia stroked Addy's hair while Nimue took another blow to her heart. She was called rude auntie, while Cecilia was called beautiful auntie, despite having met for the first time. Oh, so cute. You're so much more cuter than your mum. Cecilia chuckled as Shiro rolled her eyes. Oh, please, I'm adorable. Shiro rolled her eyes. So what do you think about my daughter, then? Since she's in love with you, have you responded to her feelings yet? Cecilia asked as Shiro sighed. I haven't. I know that she loves me, but I just don't feel the same way about her highs. Maybe I should tell her once we meet up again with the rest of the party, Shiro replied. Meh, letting it carry on with false hope is worse than rejecting outright. Cecilia chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. Is there anything else you want to ask? Cecilia asked as she held Addy for a short while. I think that's about it. Though I'm also curious about your role as queen. Have you set up an anchor yet? Shiro asked as Cecilia nodded her head. I have one anchor near the sect, but the domain is rather small since I'm not a proper queen, I guess. Cecilia shrugged. I see. Oh, right. Cecilia, can you form a subservient contract with me? For the new age? I know. The things that other queens know is a lie. Only one winner is allowed for the world to continue, and that's you, isn't it? Cecilia smiled as a Tier 8 magic circle expanded under them. Under the authority of the system, I bind myself to Shiro under a subservient contract. Cecilia smiled, since her research of the system has given her quite a bit of insight as to what would happen to the world. And she must say, it's a rather cruel joke to lie to the other queens since they wanted to save their own world. But, as their world has already failed, it's too late for them, and the only way to survival is through Shiro. Seeing the golden magic circle expand beneath them, Shiro looked at Cecilia with surprise. Do you want to give the world a big surprise? Like old times? Cecilia asked as Shiro grinned. Of course. Ari already had its fill. It's time for this world to have its fill too. Glancing at her system interface, Shiro selected yes, as an illusionary tether seemed to form between them. As the magic circle disappeared, Shiro could feel a faint connection between them as it would tell her if Cecilia is in danger or not. I don't know how this tether works, but if you bed someone and I can sense it, maybe we should find a way to block it out at times when needed. Cecilia whispered over, as Shiro blushed with embarrassment. Ignoring what she had just said, the 5 of them, including Addy, made their way back to the sect for now. On their way back to the sect, Nantien asked Shiro about the third queen that was in New York, but Shiro's only response was to show him a news article that was published not too long ago online, which showcased her parents facing off against the queen. The nanotech accessories that I gave to my parents haven't reacted yet, which means that they're safe. With the queens at their weakest, the moment they try to take over a city, even a Tier 6 entity should be something that my parents can take care of. After all, they're quite talented. Shiro chuckled with full trust in her parents' capabilities. After all, they have both technique and physical power. Well, considering how easily defeated these queens were compared to the last one we had to face next to the spirit capital, your parents have a high chance of succeeding. Nantien nodded his head. Plus, there's a clear difference between the branches and the main anchor. At the main anchor, not only would they be at close to full strength, they'll also have Tier 6 guards with them. Hell, the guards might even be more powerful, depending on the situation. I can only imagine that they didn't have Tier 6 guards follow. Them to stabilize the branch anchor was because they needed someone to defend the real anchor, Shiro theorized, as Acelia nodded her head. That's rather accurate. Until the New Age begins, they're only allowed a certain amount of guards with them. If they don't have the guards defend their anchor, there is a risk of having the enemy eliminate them immediately. Plus, most of the queens don't expect people to be able to stand up to them right now, since the average power of people in this world is rather low compared to them. Some of the queens are rather arrogant in thinking that they cannot be defeated. That all before the New Age begins. Otherwise, they would not have been this eager to capture a city. Once the New Age starts, each city they capture is a chance for the enemy to damage them, so if they want to take over a territory, they'll be more cautious, Acelia explained as Shiro nodded her head. Makes sense. How do you even make a branch anyways? Shiro asked, since it seemed like Acelia was rather knowledgeable about this subject. Well, you'll know once you set up your main anchor. Don't tell me you haven't done that yet? Acelia furrowed her brows. Not yet. Cough! I've been rather busy, so I haven't got around to doing it. Plus, I'm gathering the materials needed right now, Shiro explained as Acelia sighed. You need to do it quickly then, since you have an advantage over other queens, due to the fact that you're from this world. If you don't take advantage of this, it'll be quite a waste, Acelia explained. I know, I'm just waiting for the materials. Now, did you know a while ago, I didn't even have a chance to make the anchor since I was lacking the main component and the system didn't provide it to me like it did with the other queens? Shiro sighed. You didn't get your anchor from the system? How are you even supposed to make it? Acelia asked in disbelief. When she became the Elven Queen of Aria, she had the system ask her where she wanted to set up her anchor, so it was rather easy for her. However, if someone was to ask her how to make and set up an anchor manually, she didn't have a clue. Well, it needs some materials from this world as well as a key component that I've managed to acquire now. All that's left is for me to go back to the Spirit Capital and construct it myself. I've gotten enough information to do it, I just need the materials, Shiro replied, since she made sure to remember as much information about the anchors as she could from the future. I see. Well, in that case, then the system might not tell you about how you can set up a branch anchor. I'm not clear on the details, either since all I know is that the system will help you set it up. Acelia frowned as Shiro shrugged. That's fine. I have a skill that allows me to ask the system in a few months, so if I'm not able to set up an anchor, I can just ask it. Shiro explained as Acelia paused again. Wait, you can ask the system? The skill increases my authority level to the point where I can get information on things like the entire map of the world and so on. Shiro smiled as Acelia was stupefied. Despite all the efforts she had to go through, she could only scratch the surface, and yet Shiro could access information of much higher priority with just a single skill. Pace? You never change. The fact that you can say ridiculous things without batting an eye is crazy. Acelia sighed with a small smile, shrugging her shoulders. Shiro was about to say something when she received a request for communication. Give me a moment. Materializing an earpiece, she accepted the request. My Empress, we have collected all of the materials that you have asked us to collect, Samuel reported as Shiro nodded her head. Speaking of the anchor, it seems like most of the materials have been gathered. I just need to get some of the rarer stuff from my teacher, and I can start setting down the first anchor. Once I do that, I'll be properly recognized as a queen. Shiro glanced towards Acelia with a smile. I suppose our trip to the sect has been cancelled then. Acelia smiled. Well, it's a good chance to meet my parents, since my teacher said that he'll give the items to them. With a change of plans, the 5 of them found a nearby teleport shrine and teleported to New York. Seeing the state of New York, Shiro couldn't help but shake her head at this unfortunate city. Earlier this year, it had survived a calamity from the Black Monarchy, and now it had barely survived a fight between 3 of the strongest entities in this world. Shiro couldn't help but wonder if this beginner city was cursed or not. Rangubj, pulling out her phone, she gave her parents a call and found out that they were currently helping with cleaning up some of the debris, along with helping the injured. Relaying the information to the rest of them, they made their way to the scene. "Mom, Dad," Shiro called out with a smile. Seeing Shiro smile like this, Azealia couldn't help but feel happy in her heart, since she could already tell that Shiro was much happier now compared to her time in Arya. "Shiro, you're here. And these two are?" Mio asked while glancing towards Li Jian and Azealia. "This one is called Li Jian, the adoptive father of this kid." Li Jian grinned as he patted Nantian's shoulder. Hearing Li Jian calling him kid, Nantian couldn't help but shake his head with a soft sigh. "I am called Azealia. I am Lyrica's mother, whom you may have met." Azealia smiled. She didn't mention her friendship with Shiro just yet, since there was the chance that her parents don't know about her past lives just yet. She didn't want to say anything extra without knowing the situation. "Ah, I see. It's nice to meet you both. I'm Mio, and this is my husband, Koji." Mio smiled while Koji greeted the duo with a smile. "Since introductions are over, what are the casualties like, Mom?" Shiro asked, as she was more concerned with the people who might have died in this fight. With her control over souls, as long as they haven't died a long time ago, she'll be able to revive them in a sense and heal their body back. After all, a fight between powerhouses wasn't something these poor folk could survive. It's rather high, since a single swing could have killed hundreds. We tried to keep collateral damage to a minimum, but the casualties are still ridiculously high. We've already called in several clerics to help, but the progress is slow since the high-level clerics are at the front lines. Mio frowned as she explained the situation. "I think I can heal them, so long as they haven't died for a long time. I just need to make sure that they're in a safe spot. Otherwise, when I revive them, they'll be crushed immediately," Shiro said, as Azealia raised her eyebrow. "I thought you were a fighter or mage class." "How come you can heal too?" Azealia asked curiously. "It's just a skill of mine." Shiro chuckled as Azealia sighed. "I had almost forgotten how many skills you can recycle." "Oh, this skill isn't part of that. My skill was something I made but don't. Worry, it's not anything too crazy. Compared to what our old healer could do, this is nothing." Shiro laughed, since their old healer in the hero party was a monster when it comes to healing. Their power seemed limitless, and a single wave could heal an army back to full. "We've already excavated everyone that was buried, so you can use your skill whenever dear." Mio smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Flying into the sky, Shiro activated her true spirit nature without hesitation as a black dress wrapped around her body. Sending out her senses, she could tell that quite a few of the souls had already departed. If she was to give it a percentage, around 40% have departed, which meant that she could save just over half of them. Waving her hand, a giant Tier 6 magic circle expanded out over the city. Seeing this, quite a few of the residents were traumatized by what they had seen and had thought that this was another attack. Many fled while crying out in fear, but Shiro didn't pay them any attention. Currently, she was making some modifications to her Requiem of the Dead, as her goal was to help the souls rather than to kill them. Closing her eyes, she tried to imagine the most harmonious figure she could in mind, as this would help calm the people. Picturing the image of an angel, Shiro took a deep breath and activated her skill, Grace. Suddenly, a golden radiance flooded the magic circle as white clouds gathered above the city. Much like what happened with Requiem of the Dead, a portal opened up using the clouds as a border. However, unlike the original spell, the portal this time was golden as white feathers dropped down into the world before turning into particles of light. Those that were still running glanced up in wonder, and saw angels descending down with peaceful expressions. Several illusionary figures of those who had already passed on could be seen as a gentle radiance enveloped the entire city. Boom! A pillar of light shot up into the sky as several Tier 6 magic circles could be seen stacking on top of each other. Those that were dead started to move as their eyes would slowly open, and they would look around in confusion since their last memory was death, before being hugged by a warm energy which brought them back. Naturally, since Shiro was controlling the souls, right now she could naturally sense that several of the souls were quite evil as the color had turned a murky blue. Letting them pass on, she then activated the second part of her spell so that the people were healed back to full health. Letting out a beautiful orchestral song, the angels hovered above the city as golden runes lit up everyone's body. Energy filled their body as those with disabilities found out that they were no longer being affected. Lost limbs were regrown, curses were dispelled, and a buff was given to them. Grace of the Demigoddess. 100% to XP gain for the next week. 20% to all stats for the next week, plus 30%. Damage mitigation for the next week. Immunity to negative effects. For the next 3 days, Those who were religious kneeled towards the center of the magic circle and gave their prayers of gratitude, while others were more curious about which demigoddess had invoked such a powerful magic to help them. Climbing to the rooftops, they could see Shiro surrounded by golden lights as her white hair fluttered behind her. Despite wearing full black right now with some hints of silver, she looked graceful in the air as an orb of runic symbols and magic circles floated before her. A few people noticed that quite a few of the casualties weren't revived as sorrow filled the hearts of those who knew the deceased. Watching the scene, Isilia was enthralled by the changes that happened to her friend. In the past, she was naught but a weapon of mass destruction which could wipe out cities in a blink of an eye, but now she was a source of warmth which brought hope to the mind. As for Mio, she had a smile on her face as she watched her daughter heal those that could still be saved. Reapers were known for dragging souls away for torture or helping them pass on. But this was the first time she had seen soul control being used in the way that Shiro was using it. Clerics could revive people, yes, but that was due to the innate features of their class. Shiro, on the other hand, was not a cleric, so reviving people should be outside of her expertise. But through a combination of her healing spells and soul control, she made her own revival spell that far outclassed what some of the clerics could do. After all, not only did she revive and heal, she also gave them buffs to help them become stronger. After a short while, the portal slowly closed as the figures of the angel disappeared. Shiro floated in the air as her face was slightly pale since that spell had actually exhausted her entire true spirit nature along with 90% of her mana. However, seeing the notification on her system, her lips curled up into a smile as she hadn't expected to make such a strong spell. While it wasn't world-class, since the range was only around a city or so, it was far stronger than her other support spells. Grand Support class spell created. Requiem of the Demi-Goddess. Effects. Immediate revival of all those that have died in the last 2 hours. Those that exceed this time cannot be revived. Immediate removal of negative effects. Heal to peak condition. Bestow the buff. Grace of the Demi-Goddess. Range, 1,000 kilometers cost. Full charge of true spirit nature. 90% of mana cooldown. 2 weeks looking. Had her spell made her way back down to the ground as she had done her part now. All of the lives that she could save have been saved, and she even got a new spell out of it. Landing on the ground, Shiro stumbled for a moment due to the sudden decrease of 90% of her mana, as both Nantien and Isilia rushed to her side and helped her up. "Are you okay?" Isilia asked with a concerned expression. The spell just took a large amount of mana, so it's somewhat hard to move properly right now." Shiro smiled since it was rare for her to almost run out of mana. As a being that's reliant on mana, running out of it was similar to falling into a coma as the body would shut down. If she forcefully used a large spell that would exceed how much mana she had left, she would enter a state of mana deficiency, which could be quite lethal depending on how serious it is. Goodness, when you said a spell, I thought you'd heal people a little at best, not completely revive them, and even give them a buff to get more EXP. What happened to the murder machine I used to know? Isilia chuckled as Shiro blushed in embarrassment. It was like having an embarrassing phase of her life exposed, as she was quite psychotic back then. Thinking about the crazy moments where she would revel in the bloodshed, Shiro's face would heat up since she couldn't imagine screaming, "Give me more blood!" out again. Doing so would be akin to asking her to die. Plus, she was a mother now, so she couldn't go around acting crazy when one of her children is beside her. I suspect that news of you healing an entire city and even giving them an EXP boost should spread to the rest of the world soon. The queens will probably get information about this and recognize you as a serious threat, Mio said as Shiro nodded her head. "Man, but they don't know my identity, so we're safe for now. As for humans knowing, I don't really mind or care, so that can be set aside," Shiro replied as they could see a crowd gathering around them, furrowing. Her brows slightly. Shiro wasn't keen on talking to a crowd, so she opened a rift behind them and made their way towards the teleport shrine. Seeing this, the crowd could only sigh and regret since they couldn't talk to their savior. Arriving at the teleport shrine, Shiro suggested that they make their way to Japan, since she wanted to go collect the materials her teacher had sent. After all, making the anchor was one of her top priorities right now. Li Jian decided to go back to the sect, since there were some things that he needed to deal with before they could concentrate their full efforts in dealing with the queens. Isilia, on the other hand, decided to tag along since she wanted to meet her daughter soon. Plus, she hadn't seen her best friend in a while, so they wanted to travel together for a while, like old times. Parting with Li Jian, who teleported back to the sect, Shiro, Nantien, Mio, Koji, and Isilia made their way to Japan. Arriving in Japan, Isilia was rather surprised to find out that this city belonged to the Asakura family since the government offered it to them after their deeds on the front lines. Making their way back to the mansion, Isilia could see quite a few people greet them as it seemed that they were rather respected, especially Shiro. With some recent headlines of her actions in New York, people now understood that she must have either become a demigod or that one of her skills were super high leveled. Most believed that she must have gotten the former, since the latter was almost impossible in their eyes. No one had achieved Tier 6 yet, and they knew their Tier 6 wasn't demigod status. If it was, the queens would have been known as demigods instead. Plus, her level wasn't at the peak of Tier 5 just yet, so it made the first option even less likely. With her skill being able to mass revive and even give them an EXP boost, there were quite a few forums on the net discussing about her, as this was the first time a skill that could boost EXP gain had appeared. Sure, most of the time people might be able to get a passive skill that boosted their EXP gain by a small amount, but that was limited to one person. Shiro's skill made it so that everyone in range was affected by her skill, so as long as everyone was packed together, they could all get an EXP boost. There were even a few people that reported this to the government in hopes that they could persuade her to share this skill, but the government's response was that they could only hope. They are able to work with Miss Shiro and could not order her to do anything. After all, she was able to toy around with one of their best fighters and even give him a reward for entertaining her. This was enough of a clue for the government to understand that she wasn't one to be looked down upon or be controlled. Plus, she was also the daughter of Mio and Koji, which would only make the situation worse should they try anything with her. Not that they could in the first place. As for her party, they saw the news too, but at this point they were numb to it. Even Aram, who had received a sudden boost of what seemed to be divine energy in her mana, didn't react, as she knew she would just be wasting time being surprised at what Shiro had done. Instead, she used that time to experiment with this strange energy that enhanced her mana. While she couldn't use it individually like how Shiro did, she was able to empower her spells massively. For example, her gravity control was much harder to break out of now, as many would just be crushed into a pancake if they weren't strong enough. While Shiro was surprising people with her powers, the party was also doing the same as a rumor of powerful individuals spread through the world. A girl who was a master of the sword and couldn't be hit at all. A glutton whose fire could burn anything, and one that you shouldn't provoke, especially when food was involved. An angel who was the younger sister of the glutton, a mage that could control gravity at will. A berserk healer whose fighting style was absolutely crazy, an assassin whose attack could kill you instantly despite how much health you have, a tank whose firepower was just as strong as her defense, and a blacksmith who seemed to suddenly disappear halfway during a fight and suddenly slam a hammer into the side of your skull. With their levels growing at impressive speeds, thanks to their dungeon and raid clears, the party was becoming famous in their own way and was called the Party of Monsters due to each of them being a talented individual in their own field. There were even talks that they were stronger than the people who have hero classes, which caused a few of the factions to be displeased, but they weren't able to pin the party down. After all, Yin had the rift, and she could pull the party away should they meet any harm. With the items that Shiro had given them, Shiro would also know if they were in danger, and so far they were rather safe. If any faction decided to fight them, they would have a rather rude surprise when they realized that their backing was Shiro and the Asakura family. Setting aside the rumors about the party, the government had also published some information on the next tier up, which is 6. With their observations, they understood that to become a tier 6, being you have to reach the extreme of one element or magic that they use. The government had also published some information about the queens, which made people worry, since the world seemed like it was going to end with all of these powerful figures appearing out of nowhere and taking over cities left and right. If not for Shiro clearing Manila and Shanghai with some help, they might have lost quite a bit of hope, since those that had faced the wrath of the queens knew how dreadful they could be. Rano S. Shiro ni. Seeing Shiro and the group return, Kanai jogged towards her and hugged her with a happy smile. I'm back. Did you enjoy your rest? Shiro asked with a chuckle, since she knew how hard Koji's training must have been. Nodding her head frantically, Kanai glanced towards Koji and couldn't help but shiver slightly. Despite it not even being a full day yet, the rest felt like an oasis in the desert as it allowed her to catch her breath. Peeking her head out, Isilia glanced at Kanai with a raised eyebrow. Who's this? Isilia asked curiously. This is Kanai, who's like a little sister to me. Naturally, I have a little sister too who is currently leveling up, so I'll introduce you to her later. Kanai is someone I trust and will be helping me protect my anchor in the new world. Kanai, this is Isilia, a friend of mine, and she's Lyrica's mother. Shiro smiled. Hey? She's Lyrica's mom? She looks super young. Kanai blinked her eyes and glanced at Isilia in surprise. Man, she looks young, but you can just imagine her as a super granny. Shiro grinned, since Isilia had exposed her age earlier. Hearing Shiro call her super granny, Isilia's smile twitched, but she quickly recomposed herself. Where's Arena? Shiro asked, since she couldn't find Kanai's little training partner. Oh, she had to go back for a bit since there was something she needed to deal with. She'll be back soon, though, Kanai replied as they entered the mansion. Since Shiro's goal was to make the anchor, she didn't stay for long as she collected any materials that Stanley had dropped off. Checking her list of things that she needed to make the anchor, Shiro was pleased to find that most of the rare stuff that she needed were here, and that anything else she required had been noted down by Samuel in the spirit capital. All that she needed to do now was find the right spot and create her anchor. Right now, she knew that she needed an abundance of mana to make the best anchor for her, so that she could get an advantage, and the only place that matched the requirement of an abundance of mana was Astral Horizons, where Stanley had trained her. Once she stored the materials in her inventory, she stayed for a meal with her parents before teleporting away to the spirit capital with Nan Tien and Azealia. Before they teleported, Shiro had sent to Samuel a message, so when they arrived, there were escorts nearby. Welcome back. Everything you need has been prepared and can be collected at any moment. Samuel bowed as Shiro nodded her head. I'll be making the anchor soon, but it won't be hard. I have a better spot in mind, and once I do that, we'll be moving capital so that it's easier to travel around. Don't send news of this just yet, but start making some preparations, Shiro ordered as Samuel nodded his head. As you command, my queen. Are there any other orders? No, that's the only thing I need you to do. I'm not exactly experienced in ruling a kingdom, so I'll have to rely on you elders to help me do that instead. Shiro chuckled. Making their way to the capital, the spirits noticed that Azealia was an elf, and they were quite playful with her, since the relationship between elf and spirits had been good for several generations. Naturally, there were a few that played around with Nantien, but with how they see humans, many were still on guard around him. Collecting the materials, Shiro smiled since it was finally time to construct the anchor. Their next stop, Astral Horizons. Since she didn't have the teleport shrine near Astral Horizons, she'll need to get there manually, and the only way for her to do that would be through the teleport scrolls that Stanley had given her. But she had an idea for her to make a way to get there without the teleport scroll. After all, it would be rather awkward if she didn't have a quick way to reach her main anchor should an attack be launched against it. Her idea was that she wanted to do something similar to what she had done in the quest, where she had first met Kuromi. She wanted to use her celestial energy or divine energy to create an orb or mark which allows her to teleport to it immediately should she require it. Plus, with her control, there was the possibility that she's able to mark other people so that she could appear beside them. That way, if they run into any trouble, she can save them in their time of need. Waving her hand, a black orb appeared above her palm as she casually threw it to the side. Imagining something similar to her rift, like back in the trial world, a portal opened up under Shiro as she appeared right where she had thrown the orb. Men, travel time is a bit slow and it's instantaneous, Shiro muttered as Azealia raised her eyebrow. Are you trying to make a new skill again? She asked since Shiro used to experiment with blueprints all the time. But now she was a proper mage that always looked for new spells. I am. I know where I want to make the anchor, but I want to be able to access it at all times. So essentially, I'm making something similar to a teleport shrine, I guess. Shiro shrugged as Azealia placed her hand on her chin. Well, if you want, I can tell you about what I know. I did do some research on teleport shrines after all, as the two were discussing their ideas on making the fake teleport shrine. Nantien sighed softly as he glanced out of the window. It was a shame that he couldn't help, since he didn't know much about making spells or experimenting like the two ladies. While the two were concentrating, he decided to step out of the room for now. Seeing Samuel by the side, Nantien smiled and gave him a small wave. Sir, do you require anything? Samuel bowed since he knew that Nantien was important to Shiro. Nothing. I'm just going to have a short walk around since Shiro and Azealia are discussing a new skill that will help them with traveling back and forth from the anchor. Nantien replied with a smile. I see. In that case, would you like one of the elders to accompany you on your walk so that they can show you around? Samuel offered as Nantien shook his head. I'll be fine. I just want a short walk around, nodding. His head, Samuel stepped aside as Nantien made his way out of the castle. Taking a deep breath, he sighed softly before glancing at the spirits that played around in the streets. It reminded him of his time together with Shiro when they were kids, but naturally, it wasn't the same since Shiro was Shiro. For Kuromi, he had feelings of gratitude, but for Shiro's personality, it was feelings of love. At first, he didn't recognize her since he had been taken away during their childhood, but once she matured some more thanks to her level-ups, he eventually realized who she was due to the news that he had heard. Shaking his head, he wondered when he had fallen for her, since it just started as a monster that could be beneficial to humanity. She was interesting, since, unlike other sentient monsters, she didn't kill every human on sight, and her trickster-like personality made him chuckle whenever he thought of her deeds. Renobe smiling softly, he glanced towards the window where they were currently working. As if sensing his gaze, Shiro sat up and looked out the window. Seeing Nantien, she only smiled and focused back on work. She was probably wondering who glanced towards her. Nantian thought to himself, since he understood that her senses towards other people were very sharp. Just a single negative thought about her while looking towards her will give your position away. As for how she even cultivated this kind of sense, Nantian didn't know what she had to go through to become this perceptive to her surroundings. He knew that in her first life, she had gone through a lot of torture before she could even use nanobots, but it was brushed over, which he understood that she probably didn't want to go into detail about the pain she had to suffer. It was unfortunate, but that was the past, so there was nothing they could do about it. All he could do was hope that she could make her current life enjoyable, which was rather hard considering the responsibilities weighing down on her shoulders. But with the return of her best friend, he could tell that she was much happier, but it only made him slightly sad, since to him it seemed like he wasn't able to give her the same sense of happiness. Having a short walk around the city, a few of the spirits avoided him like before, but he didn't mind. Finishing his walk, which helped him clear his mind a little, Nantian made his way back to the castle. Opening the door, he could see a happy Shiro, who was typing things up on a laptop while throwing black orbs around the room. "Oh, you're back. How was your walk?" Shiro asked with a smile as Nantian chuckled. "It was quite relaxing. Seems like you have made quite a bit of progress with the spell." With Isilia's information on teleport shrines, it made the progress much faster. I think I can crack this in another hour or so. Shiro grinned as Isilia had a smile while sitting beside her. "Man, congrats. Is there anything I should do while you experiment?" he asked, just in case, but she shook her head. "It's all right. I'll be done soon, and then we'll make our way to Astral Horizons. If anything, just keep a lookout for any information on the Queens, I suppose." Nodding his head, Nantian sat down on a sofa by the side and pulled out his phone. After a short while, Shiro sat up with a satisfied smile. "Nantian? Can you help me test something?" Shiro asked as he nodded his head. "What do you need?" he asked. While standing up. "Nothing. Just sit there for me." Shiro grinned as she stood up. "I'll be right back." After saying that, she jumped into the rift and left the room. Waiting patiently for a while, Nantian watched as a portal opened up under the sofa that he was on. Blinking his eyes, he found himself in the middle of New York on a sofa. Glancing around him, he saw Shiro standing in front of him with a grin. "It works. I've succeeded in making a fake teleport shrine." Shiro boasted as Nantian chuckled. "Congratulations. I'm not exactly a fan of sitting on a sofa in the middle of a destroyed building, so shall we go back?" Nantian asked as Shiro nodded her head. But before she went back, she sat down on the sofa. "Are you all right?" she asked with a serious expression. "Emin? What do you mean?" Nantian asked curiously. "You seem like you have something on your mind. You said that the walk is relaxing, but you seem plagued by something." Shiro glanced up at him. Currently, they were sitting on a sofa surrounded by broken debris, but no one was around since they were clearing the outside debris first. Hearing Shiro, Nantian understood that she must have picked up on his worries. Sighing. Softly, he shrugged his shoulders. "I can't hide it from you, I guess. I'm just thinking about what I can do to help you. I wanted to make you happy, but I wasn't able to achieve that. When Isilia came back, you seemed much happier, so it just made me think about myself and what I can do, I suppose. Are you seriously worried about that?" She glanced at him with an "Are you serious" face. Scratching his cheek embarrassingly, Nantian glanced to the side and nodded his head. Nice. To think the great Nantian would have this side to him, haha. Well, don't worry. You also make me happy. You know, it's just that I haven't seen Isilia in a long time. As for you, well, you also make me feel safe, okay? There aren't many people that can cover my back in this world. I can trust my back to you since you're strong and you give me a sense of security, I suppose. But you worry too much, so stop being depressing. Shiro coughed embarrassingly as she stood up and prepared the spell back. As for Nantian, he paused when he heard what she had said. So, I make her feel safe, huh? He thought with a smile. Sensing that Nantian's mood had improved quite a bit, Shiro smiled and activated the spell. Teleporting them back to the spirit capital, Shiro saw Isilia waiting by the side with a smile. I suppose everything is ready now? Isilia chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. The final test seemed to have no problems, so the plan is for me to use the teleport scroll to reach Astral Horizons while I leave an orb back here. Once I reach the other side, I'll set down the orb so that the portal becomes connected. Hopefully nothing should go wrong. Shiro smiled. Don't jinx it now. I'm not going to say anything, since there's a possibility that it may happen. Isilia smiled. Never knew that you were the superstitious kind. Shiro raised her eyebrow. Well, after all the things that I have gone through and the coincidences that happened, let's just say it's not impossible, and could actually be very likely. Isilia chuckled as Shiro shrugged since she agreed with her, seeing the dangers lurking around every corner that she walked around. It'll be more concerning if nothing went wrong. Doing some final checks, Shiro took a deep breath and pulled out a scroll with a magic circle painted on one side. This was the teleport scroll that Stanley had given her, and it would take her to astral horizons. Even if her magic didn't work, she'd be able to roughly guess her location after wandering around for a bit. After all, she now had the map of the entire world stored in her database, since she technically didn't keep the feature in her system interface, but rather memory. Inserting mana into the scroll, Shiro felt the scroll heat up as a weightless feeling washed over her body. Before she realized it, she was already standing at the top of a familiar mountain, surrounded by a sea of clouds that was actually made from condensed mana. Taking a deep breath, she couldn't help but shake her head as her sense of mana had improved by leaps and bounds. Feeling the power flowing through her body, she couldn't believe how wasteful her usage was back then. While it was still not perfect, it was far better than what it initially was. Waving her hand gently, the clouds started to sway with her movements, as it seemed like God had just decided to place his hand into the ocean and move it around. The overlapping clouds that acted like waves swirled around the mountain peak, as Shiro was enjoying this quite a bit. However, she had more important matters, so she stopped playing around with the clouds and got to making the orb portal. Snapping her fingers, a black orb appeared before her as it slowly expanded into a portal. Seeing Nantien and Decilia on the other side, Shiro gave them a small wave. Seems like the portal's working all right. I'll get to making the anchor as well as the city here since I don't have to worry about mana. Shiro grinned as Decilia looked at astral horizons in shock. Despite hearing that there were condensed mana, clouds from Shiro, it was still a little unbelievable, since the amount of mana required would be off the charts. However, now that she was seeing it for herself, Decilia couldn't help but rub her eyes, since this was basically every mage's holies. Land. I can't believe that a place like this actually exists, Decilia muttered. What? Did you think I'd lie to you? Shiro laughed as she closed the portal behind Nantien. Now that she had left 2 markers, essentially, she could travel between the 2 locations whenever she wanted. Naturally, the markers would expire eventually, but for now it was rather helpful. All she needed to do was remember to refresh it so that the time was extended. Glancing up at the sky, Nantien raised his hand as light gathered around him. Raising his eyebrow, he realized that the element came to him much easier while he was in the vicinity of a mana-dense area like this mountain peak. If he had to describe it, he'd say that everything was roughly 10 times easier just from the amount of mana it cost. All right then, while I get to making the anchor, are you two able to scout out the mountain a little to check for any danger, since I don't want to be making a city here and it being immediately destroyed? Shiro chuckled. Ranobe is shy. Did try to send out her mana, but her senses were blocked by the clouds, since they were made from dense mana, so it was almost impossible to see past them with her mana sense. She did try to use her analysis skill, but the outcome was the same. Therefore, she understood that this mountain probably needed to be explored manually. Sure, I can explore it a little. With the mana density being so high, I can also experiment with a few skills of my own since I've been slacking a bit. Nanny. Tien chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. I'll do the same after I finish this. Isilia called out. Currently, she was already investigating a few of the materials that could be found at the peak, since their composition must have been affected by the dense mana. And then take your time. It might be a while before I finish making the anchor, after all. Shiro smiled before laying out all of the materials that she needed in front of her. Looking at the pile of items, she couldn't help but shake her head. If it was before, it would have taken her years to collect everything she needed, but with just a few words to one of the spirit elders and her teacher, all of the items were now in front of her. Taking a deep breath, she brought up the method hidden in her memory after she met her future self. Remembering all of the information she had collected on anchors, Shiro narrowed her eyes as a Tier 7 magic circle expanded out from under her. Bringing out the miniature anchor that she had received from the garden spirit, Shiro let it float. In the air as the materials slowly melted themselves down into a golden liquid. Closing her eyes, Shiro focused on slowly letting the liquid condense down, meld together with the shard. This was the hardest task from her memories, since it determines how effective your anchor is. If the process is rushed, the anchor could be worse than a branch anchor, as it would probably shatter with a single sneeze. But for Shiro, patience and control well within her capabilities, and all that was left was to just follow the instructions carefully. While Shiro was making the anchor, both Nantien and Isilia could feel the mana being sucked towards the anchor as Shiro was focusing entirely on making sure that this was done properly, since they only had one shard of the garden. Glancing at each other, they decided to set down a few alarm barriers walking down the mountain, making their way down what seemed to be a rocky path. Their vision was obscured by the thick clouds of mana, which were very difficult to look through. Even when using skills to enhance their perception, it was hard to see anything past their arm. Furrowing his brows, Nantien decided to see if his magic could help as he created a small orb of light before clutching it. Flashing in an instant, The small orb was similar to a flash grenade, which sent a small 3D scan of their surroundings into his mind. Unlike Shiro, he couldn't remember it in clear detail, but the general idea was good enough. It was still a bit difficult thanks to the clouds, but overall it was slightly better than seeing through their eyes. Helping Asilia with navigating down the mountain, they found a few caves and paths which branched out from the main path towards the peak. It's a bit risky exploring this place when our senses are dulled, Asilia muttered while throwing a sword into a cave before returning it back to her side. She wanted to see if there were any monsters which might have reacted, but it seemed empty for the most part. I suppose I can try to find the source of all this mana, since for mana to be this dense, there is a definite source. Nantian narrowed his eyes as Asilia agreed. Do you want to tell Shiro first, just in case? She's making the anchor right now, so if the mana was to suddenly disappear, it would be rather bad, Asilia reminded. Nodding his head, Nantian understood. Her worries. I know. What I mean is for us to find the source of it, so that Shiro could perhaps integrate it with the anchor. Remember, all of this mana is from one source, so if she could use it to her advantage, it would prove to be very helpful. Nantian smiled as Asilia raised her eyebrow. The plan seemed feasible to some extent. Agreeing with Nantian, Asilia could see his reasoning behind it. However, at the first sign of danger, we're going to leave immediately, okay? I'm going to ask Shiro for 2 teleport orbs so that we can teleport to the peak of the mountain and notify her of the first sign of danger. Asilia said, since any monster that have lived in such a mana-rich zone would be very strong. I'll wait for you here while you go ask Shiro, Nantian said as he nodded his head. Watching Asilia make her way back to Shiro, he glanced back at the cave and narrowed his eyes. While his senses couldn't probe far into the cave, he could definitely tell that the mana density was becoming thicker as mana had even started to liquefy within the cave. Walking up to the walls, he could feel their dampness as a thin layer of liquid mana glistened on their surface. Collecting some in a vial, he wanted to bring some back to Shiro so that she could give them a look to see if they have any special properties. Collecting around? 3 vials for testing, he waited patiently at the entrance to the cave. Not too long after, Asilia returned. Shiro told us to stay safe, since our main priority is to make the anchor and the flying fortress. Exploring is secondary, so if we run into any danger, which she doubts, come back immediately. Asilia said as Nantian nodded his head and stood up. I've collected some samples, so we can have a look at them later, but it seems like this cave is where the density of the mana starts to increase. Even at the entrance, it's liquefying, Nantian said as Asilia furrowed her brows. Let's enter then. And while Asilia and Nantian were exploring the cave, Shiro had small droplets of sweat rolling down her face as she was trying her best to do the anchor properly. However, since the only experience she had with it was seeing some data, it was hard for her to progress quickly. Everything was moving at a snail's pace as she focused her mind to the task. As she was doing this, she was also going through the data in her mind and found a few spots that she could perhaps improve with different materials. One such is using divine energy within this, since divine energy harmonizes with mana quite nicely and even enhances its properties when used together. Therefore, the chances of the anchor being upgraded was high. The only problem was that this was her only crystal, so doing it did pose some risk. Furrowing her brows, Shiro wanted to test out her own method, but at the same time doing so could ruin things. Gritting her teeth, she contemplated over this decision while making the anchor. It was in her nature to always try new things, but each time she did so, a new risk would appear. When she combined her berserk skills, she was able to survive the Gorgon and even find the first trace of error. But the backlash of this had almost killed her, had her friends not tried their best to stabilize her condition. Biting her lip, Shiro had a humorous idea. Fuck it, let the coin decide. Shiro smirked as she pulled out a gold coin. Placing it on her finger, she flicked it as hard as she could so that it spun a lot but didn't fly too high. Closing her eyes, she waited for a sound of the coin dropping. Heads. Do the test and tails for sticking with the current method, Shiro thought to herself as she opened her eyes. Ping! The first bounce, then the second, and eventually the coin landed on one side. Seeing the side, Shiro's smile curved up into a grin as she saw that it was heads. Rubbing her hands together in excitement, she glanced towards the anchor like a kid with a new toy. Of course, her experiments wasn't going to change the anchor much since that was actually just stupid, but rather it aimed to improve some of the materials used within the anchor. The main one being adding divine energy. Taking a deep breath, Shiro clasped her hands together as a Tier 6 magic circle started to expand out from her. However, a Tier 6 magic circle wasn't enough, since it was still within the realm of humans. Closing. Her eyes, golden runes lit up around her as a pillar of light shot up into the sky. The mana clouds swirled up as it sought out the pillar of divine radiance. Sitting in the middle, a silver radiance wrapped around Shiro as her body almost seemed ephemeral. Waving her hand, and 2 Tier 7 magic circles expanded outwards as a divine energy burst forth. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro clasped her hands together once more. Creating a pure white orb between her hands, Shiro pushed it towards the floating anchor that was in the process of being made and shattered it to countless shards. With just 10 minutes of this form, she had to imbue as much divine energy as she could, so that the only thing she needed to do once her form ran out was to control the energy. Activating her skill analysis, Shiro glanced at the anchor and started to thread divine energy through its body where mana would be used to enhance its effectiveness. As divine energy was wrapping around the anchor, the surrounding mana clouds seemed to condense and swarm towards the anchor like a hungry beast. Normally, Shiro would be on guard, but entering demigod form allowed her to see that the mana was trying to assist the divine energy in what it was doing. In other words, the surrounding mana was now helping her with making the anchor, which is perfect. Smiling softly, Shiro continued to add divine energy into the anchor as she could see it reaching completion. Hours passed as Shiro sat in the same spot. The anchor was beginning to look like a proper anchor as there were faint pulses of golden energy which made Shiro feel invigorated. Her demigod form had long ran out as she was currently controlling the divine energy that was still within the anchor. Nantien and Asilia hadn't returned yet, but Shiro knew that they weren't in any danger, since the nanobots on Asilia's body hadn't reacted yet. As she was reaching the 24th hour, she sensed a chance within the anchor. Boom! Golden runes appeared in the sky as an unidentifiable magic circle started to descend from the sky and wrap around the anchor. Despite seeing the magic circle in front of her, everything became a blur the moment she would focus on it, almost as if it was censored. She couldn't tell what tier or what runes the magic circles used, as she could only smile bitterly since it would have been quite helpful. However, she didn't mind much, as this was the final step in making the magic circle. All she had to do was now wait, since the last pieces were now being formed. Compared to the 24-hour crafting process she had to go through, this wait was nothing as it was soon complete. Seeing the notification on her system interface, Shiro grinned as her efforts had paid off. You have constructed a main anchor manually. You are now recognized as a participant. You have constructed a divine anchor manually. As the first to make a divine anchor before the new age, your anchor gains enhanced benefits compared to normal divine anchors. Divine anchor. While the queen is within range, they get a 40% boost to their power, while the enemy queen that is within your domain suffers a 40% decrease to their stats, spell effectiveness, and 40% system assistance. Your followers will gain a 50% boost to exp gain, as well as a 30% boost to stats. Placing a branch anchor doesn't cost as much, and you're not weakened severely, only moderately. Your anchor will passively generate divine energy, which is funneled to you. Reading the list, Shiro couldn't help but raise her eyebrows, since there were more benefits than this, but these were just the key ones. There were benefits, such as amazing harvest or natural disaster prevention. The main key was that her domain was actually double the effectiveness of usual domains, since the queen's domain would weaken the enemy by 20%, while her domain actually weakened them by 40%. Anyone who tried to fight her in her own domain was essentially asking to be killed. However, setting the benefits aside, she had changed the future and obtained her own anchor.